Bakir was in shock, thinking it was a real monster, but the reality was that the monster's body had been cut into pieces, which was scattered around the place. This monster was a basilisk, an S-level danger beast also known as the Dragon of the Sand River. With its 50-meter size, it was considered a terrifying hybrid between dragon and demon. Last seen on the 10th crest of the Black Mountains. Its breath could knock birds out of the sky, and the places where its scaly body crawled became barren deserts for half a century. The mere existence of this being was a disaster, an entity that could not be eliminated by any spear, sword or magic. The little spider's eyes filled with fear and she couldn't help but tremble. Noticing this, Bakir petted her and with a serene expression assured her there was no reason to be afraid. It was just a corpse, and it was already dead. Despite being with Bakir, the little spider couldn't stop feeling afraid. Our boy began to stare at the corpse in silence and sank into his thoughts. Bakir began to imagine Madam with eyes shining with evil and a member of the Baluk tribe. He remembered that, before his regression, until the beginning of the era of destruction, the basilisk had been one of the 3 great disasters known as the 3 calamities from beyond. It was an existence for which there had been no trace until it revealed its form. Bakir had always thought that it was simply hiding somewhere. Bakir came out of the monster's mouth and began to walk around silently. He couldn't believe that the monster had died in such a miserable way. Bakir's attention was fixed on the strange tree. The basilisk possessed a regenerative ability even greater than that of the swamp newt. Because of this, the fact that it died cornered to such an extent had a much more serious implication. The wind began to blow, a sandstorm was coming. While the small spider was hidden in his clothes, Bakir began to stare at the tree with a serious expression. This could only mean that there existed something, or someone, capable of killing an S-class beast with an almost immortal regenerative ability. The place was as chilling as its appearance. There was space-time distortion magic there of a higher level, even more complex than that of the Magic Tower or Andromalius's barrier. Bakir decided to investigate what was happening. He approached the tree and thought it was time to open the door. Little by little he began to open the door, letting sunlight enter into the gloomy place. While his eyes were shining with determination, Bakir fully opened the door, which was covered in dust. It had not been opened in a long time, which meant that he was one of the few brave ones who dared to enter. At that moment, a powerful but strange mana shot out toward Bakir. His eyes widened in confusion and surprise, leaving him in shock. A powerful mana began to emerge from the place. Bakir tightly clenched his fist and put it in front of his face and his eyes began to shine with seriousness, realizing that this was not good. The attention of the little spider was fixed on something, making her feel somewhat surprised. Bakir began to gaze toward the ground and a confident smile spread across his face. He had detected a mana from an unfathomable dimension. He realized that he had arrived at the right place. Once the door opened completely, Bakir decided to enter. The floor was full of swords and in front of our boy, there was a man sitting on a throne. He was a knight who wore black armor and had his sword stuck into the ground. He was the one emitting that powerful and intense mana. This was the Tree of Spirits. It was said that the great master of dark arts, Sire Zamog, had planted it deep within the flood between the Black Mountains, in the White Salt Desert. This was a mana tree that took root in the mind of the mage, growing by feeding on karma from souls. The condition for its seed to germinate was a large number of deaths, and whoever consumed its fruit would obtain power from spirits who served as fertilizer. While the sunlight illuminated the place, with a serene expression, Bakir began to walk toward the knight, realizing that this place was like the cradle of swords. His attention was fixed on the tip of one of the swords and his eyes began to shine with curiosity. He noticed that the only difference was that this time, the blades were not pointing at the ground but at the sky. He did not know if this place was related in any way to Baskerville. Several seconds later, Our boy stopped walking and remained silent. Bakir approached the knight and began to stare intently with a serious expression, wondering if he was the owner of this tree. The place was filled with an intense aura he had never seen before. Bakir could not feel mana, nor vitality, nor anything at all. It seemed that the knight had died a long time ago and only his shell remained. If he was who had killed the basilisk, he concluded that he must have been an extremely powerful warrior in life. The knight had his hands resting on the pommel and hilt of the sword. While Bakir's eyes shone with curiosity, he began to move his hand toward the roots of the tree. He decided that first he should take the tree of spirits and then ask Hugo about this place. Once Bakir's hand approached the root of the tree, something strange happened and Bakir stood still. The torches that were on the wall behind the knight suddenly lit up with red flames. Not long after, all the torches in the place gradually began to light up. Noticing this, the little spider panicked and her eyes widened in fear. She felt that something was not right. Just then, the door suddenly closed and something even stranger happened. Little by little the knight who before only seemed like a shell began to move. He tightly grabbed the hilt of the sword. The knight rested one hand on the arm of the throne and began to gaze toward the ground. Upon seeing this, the small spider began to tremble and hit again inside Bakir's clothes. Despite being trapped, Bakir began to show a calm expression. For him this was expected and he knew that he could not take what he wanted so easily. The powerful and imposing knight drew his sword which was stuck in the ground and stood up. Bakir did not lower his guard and began to observe him in silence, knowing that this was not good. The knight grabbed his sword tightly and prepared to attack. While little by little the sword was getting closer, Bakir's eyes began to shine with determination. He knew that he had to dodge or otherwise he was going to die. The knight swung his sword forcefully, but Bakir reacted in time and dodged the attack, causing his sword to hit the ground, shattering it into pieces. The knight was not like any other swordsman. He changed his grip and unleashed a chain of powerful slashes, but thanks to his agile body, Bakir did not have many problems dodging the attacks. The small spider emerged and began staring at the knight. Bakir remained calm and his eyes shone with serenity upon noticing that the attack pattern was dangerously monotonous, without a will of its own. The knight simply charged at the enemy in front of him in a succession of senseless movements. While the knight was preparing to attack again, Bakir landed on the ground and his eyes filled with disappointment. A smile spread across his face. He had thought it would be a knight who protected an extraordinary place, but now he realized that it had been a useless hope. Bakir drew his bow and prepared to shoot a mana arrow. His mind was full of questions. He wondered how the knight could fight without mana or vitality, but he knew he didn't have time to dwell on this now. Bakir shot the arrow with an expression full of determination and decided to send him to the other world in one blow. The powerful mana arrow began spinning like a bullet and shot toward the knight. He began to gaze at the ground and fell silent. Then he raised his head and his eye began to shine with evil. The knight used the first Baskerville technique and using all his power, swung the sword with precision, cutting the mana arrow in half. Bakir's attack was so powerful that it created a great explosion of mana. Our boy's eyes widened in surprise and fear. He couldn't believe that the knight had just used the first Baskerville technique. Without wasting another second, the knight gained momentum and prepared to attack again. The little spider panicked. Knowing this wasn't good, Bakir clenched his teeth tightly. He knew it, the knight had been hiding his strength. Immediately, he shouted at the little spider to hide. Our boy decided it was time to get serious and drew his sword Beelzebub, causing an intense aura to begin emerging from it. The knight began charging toward Bakir, and upon noticing this, our boy adopted a defensive stance. Then, he clenched his fist tightly and the mana hardened like crystal around the blade of his sword. The knight attacked with all his strength. And Bakir used the seventh Baskerville technique, but to his surprise, The powerful knight used the 8th Baskerville technique, unleashing powerful mana slashes. He was so fast that Vakir didn't even have time to react, causing deep cuts all over his body. Our boy opened his mouth and began screaming in pain. The knight began to gaze toward the ground. But then little by little his helmet started to break. His eyes began to shine with rage and his attention focused on our boy. Not long after, his helmet broke into pieces and began to fall to the ground, revealing the true identity of the knight. He was a man with white hair and had his face covered in bandages. Bakir's eyes widened in fear and, while he was sweating and panting heavily, he realized that the knight had used Baskerville's 8th technique, an ambush from hiding. Faced with this, he wondered what T.